important things to say today.
Drinking your coffee near, so it's time to come in, take your seats. We're very glad to start
Pessoal, vamos...
phase of our event. Se vocês precisam, if you need translation, it will be delivered. This part will be delivered in Portuguese. So if you speak English, take your headsets and you're going to have the translation. Podem se chegando, gente. Si vous parlez français aussi, il y a la traduction. Cette partie de l'événement, ça sera totalement en portugais. Mais on a toujours la possibilité de la traduction avec les écouteurs qui sont en bas de la salle. Então é isso, gente. Vamos começar o nosso evento da tarde.
Let's start this afternoon session, and I will introduce you to a very important person.
Para ellos que hablan español, para los hispanohablantes, tenemos también la traducción en español. Los auriculares están disponibles para todos. Então eu vou chamar aqui agora, amigos, uma pessoa que vai nos ajudar a conduzir esse evento da tarde.
So this person will be with us this afternoon, which is a celebration of the 10 plus 1 years of the Forest Investment Program in Brazil, the FIP. We will listen to very important things from the environmental perspective as well as the economic perspective. It's a different perspective of Brazil that we'll be able to see from their viewpoint.
To talk in Portuguese. Então vamos lá. Eu vou chamar o Pedro Bruzzi, que é o diretor executivo da Fundação Pro.
We have Pedro Bruzzi, the executive director of the Pro Nature Foundation, Funatura. He is a forest engineer and he has had a long career in the field. He has a degree from the Federal Rural University of Rio de Janeiro. And his master's degree is from the Center of Sustainable Development of the University of Brasilia. He plays a key role for the environment. He's the executive director of the Pro Nature Foundation. So you have the floor, Pedro. Thank you, Vico. It's an honor to have you here with us. I'm very happy to be here today. You have no idea. It's like Rita Lee used to say, it was crazy to get here. And such a complex project and such a complex program. So I really want to thank you, those from the Climate Investment Funds, Mafalda, the World Bank, the IDB, the Brazilian government, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, the Minister of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Agriculture, and all these ministries who have allowed this program to celebrate its anniversary. Our 10th anniversary was in 2022. Vico mentioned 10 plus 1 years. This is the 11th anniversary of the program. We are very happy to have achieved the results we have, and it wasn't easy. I really want to thank our team, Fernanda, Ingrid, who are here with us. So our foundation, Funatura, is one of the executive agencies of the FIP. And the coordination of the FIP is done via Ministry of Environment. That's why we have Edo Moraes, our National Secretary of Native Peoples, and she will bring a technical presentation. I really want to thank her. And I want to thank the support of the Ministry of the Environment. They play a very important role in such a big program, and such an important program. And a lot of things were necessary for us to be here today. A huge effort, I mean, and long one. Each project has a complex institutional arrangement made of different organizations. We have a portfolio of 8 projects. 6 of them are government-owned, and 2 are done with the private initiative. We have BGN and the INACA Institute. These are the 2 projects with the private initiative. We're able to gather most of the results per project, actually the main results, and it's available on the adjacent room. We made a video, we have some photos, and you can see the 3 screens. In the central screen, we have the name of the project, its main results. It's in English and Portuguese. To the right, we have pictures, and to the left, we have the videos. And we also have a timeline with the main results of the program in the last 10 years. You can click, you can get the QR code where we have the full range of material. And we have a publication with a summary of the program and a detailed report with all the outcomes from each one of the projects. It was a major effort, and I'm so glad to my team. They were able, in a short period of time, to finish up all the products, and I'm so proud of my team. We also have 9 mini documentaries. They're also available on the web. You just need to use the QR code. And we produced a mug with sustainable recyclable material. It's probably in your bags. And there's a QR code there too. So you can have access to all these products and material that we created during the process. And I will invite the speaker, the National Secretary of Traditional Peoples and Sustainable Rural Development, Edo Moraes, and she will give the technical presentation. Edo is amazing. I've been an activist in the forest movement for many years, and I met her in Acre, the cults of the forest. She's a colleague at CDS. I'm in my master's degree. She's taking her PhD. She has a master's degree already, and she's a very important leader in the Marajó region. She's a legitimate representative of the extractivism movement, and she is also the national secretary. I don't know why he's being so nice. You shouldn't trust him because he said he's my friend, so you never know. Just kidding. Good afternoon to all women and non-women people. I am so happy to be here with you. And where are my guys? Where are they? They're not here. They haven't arrived because I'm here for them. That's why I'm here. And I represent people, traditional peoples and communities in the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change and Sustainable Rural Development. To all of you who are not Brazilians, you're welcome to our country. This is a very important time because it's a landmark, a historical time of our transition. It is a time we are taking democracy back to our hands to strengthen democracy. And having representatives of the whole world here with us is also a landmark of this process to show that we exist and we resist. So I want to thank you all for your presence, and on behalf of Sinea, please, Sinea, where are you? She is a relative from another indigenous ethnic group. So I'd like to ask the permission to start my presentation. Will you help me, Pedro? So, first, this is what I would like to say. I'd like to greet and celebrate more than 10 years in the forest investment program in Brazil. The former director, general director of the Forest Service, told us that at the time he was with the World Bank, and when the FIP Brazil was approved, the first meeting in 2012. So there's been a long journey. And as a manager, I remember the other side I was always participating, proposing, sometimes fighting, because this is how they look at us when we decide to shout. It's fine, it's okay, this is our battle, and it helps us move forward. But this is a program with a lot of important innovations, and we are going to talk a little bit about the results of the work that has been developed in this field. So Pedro will help me in my presentation and will give his inputs. Where do you prefer me to stay, Pedro? Is it fine from here? But before, I'd like to say where I come from. I'm from the Amazon region in the Marajó island. And I would like to start my talk mentioning the importance of the Cerrado biome. It is the source of water for more than 8 water basins in Brazil. So I'd like to start by saying that we need to defend this biome, to fight for it, to protect it, peoples, communities, farmers, and producers, because it means to fight for the Amazon and also all the other biomes. It's fighting for all of us as human beings, because we need a healthy planet and a healthy climate. And in Brazil, we need water to live, to produce, and to exist. I'd like to celebrate this and to highlight the presence and the existence of this biome, which is so important for Brazil, the second largest in Brazil and South America. This biome brings water security and food and energy guarantees. It's very important for the modulation of the climate, and it's very important for the existence of more of 80 indigenous ethnicities who live in this region, as well as Quilombola communities and traditional communities and local communities. Some local communities only exist in this biome, and we need to commit to them. As a society, we have to be committed to keep on fighting for the existence of these people and this biome. And the Cerrado is where we find the huge biological biodiversity that is seriously threatened. So we all need to commit to the protection of this biome. We'll talk a little bit about the investment plans for Brazil. For the Forest Investment Program, it's the largest and most important program of cooperation on the social environmental topic ongoing in the Brazilian Cerrado. We need to reinforce that and talk about the importance of the Cerrado and thank for this large program that brings significant impact to this biome. But not only for that, transformational changes have occurred during this program. In 2022, FIP celebrated its 10th anniversary. As like Pedro said, today we celebrate 10 plus 1, 11 years of history of this project. Doing this, respecting the environmental legislation and focusing on sustainability. The climate investment funds is on the top of this design of the pathway we threaded until we finally reached the 9th project, because we have 9 projects, FIP coordination executed by Funatura, and we are responsible for this project. We also want to talk about the other 8 projects that will be developed based on this investment. These are the projects in Brazil. This is an important image because these projects have been done by so many hands, traditional peoples, partners, investors, and countries which are part of this group. This is the FIP called Cerrado ABC. It is about sustainable production in areas that have been converted for agricultural use and cattle raising based on a low carbon agricultural practices, which is what ABC stands for. And it shows it's possible to start a transition and to implement actions respecting the whole environment. These are some of the main outcomes. This presentation will be made available to you, so I'm not going to read all the topics, but I think it's important to mention that there are some results I'd like to highlight. We have learned a lot of lessons, and the good results of this FIP are based on a rural landscape FIP project which supports conservation of sustainable production. More than 11.3 thousand beneficiaries, and 20% of them are women. We want to move forward. We want to have a larger number of women because this is a mission we won't leave behind. 8.5 thousand people were trained in capacity building programs, and 22% of this group were women. We need to highlight that we have a mission. We need to do more to be more equitable. The FIP Rural Environmental Registry is covering the field of property titles in the Cerrado biome. There are executive executing entities which are part of this program with an executed investment of 6.20 million reais of loans from the CIF via World Bank. This project was executed from 2017 to 2022. These are the main outcomes. More than 3.6 million small rural properties were listed, and more than 312,000 families of farmers. And also 35,000 medium-sized properties were listed. So this is an example that it's possible to use this instrument to favor the protection of the people and the environment as a whole. We have the Cerrado Monitoring FIP project to develop systems to prevent fires, forest fires, and monitor the plant coverage in the Brazilian Cerrado. So the idea was to monitor deforestation, to provide information about fire risks, and also estimate the production of greenhouse gas effects in the Cerrado. It was executed from 2016 to 2021, and it's a very important source of information for us to be able to plan and execute public policies with good results.
So the primary results of this are rural mapping of deforestation for the entire Cerrado from 2000 to 2018 through the PRODES program. So Brazil is now supposed to have a tool for analysis and evaluation for the country and for the world that they can use to inform their public policy making. And here the report shows that for every real invested. The FIP monitoring project has generated 5.89 reais to society, which shows that investing monitoring are beneficial for the country. We need to monitor, we need to know where risks exist so that we can design and implement public policies accordingly. So Cerrado monitoring is followed up with the support of FIP Rural Landscapes and other projects. The FIP IFM projects, which is forest information for management to conserve and elevate Cerrado resources by both the public and private sector. So the goal here was to conduct a national level inventory in 9 states where Cerrado exists for the collection of forest information. Pedro will be happy to share all that information. It's a wealth of information, but I would like to emphasize some achievements here. 174 million hectares of inventoried areas, which accounts for 83% of Cerrado, with data on forest resources, timber and non-timber resources, uses of biodiversity species, deforestation and carbon use. It is also possible for monitoring, such a monitoring project, we were able to identify 9 new plant species in the Cerrado, which also reflects that we do not yet know everything about our biomes and the Cerrado biome in particular. Now, FIP DGM Brazil. So the dedicated mechanism for traditional communities, indigenous peoples, or local communities, and the steering committee at the national level was FIP DGM Brazil, and the implementing agency was the Centro de Aquicultura Alternativa do Norte de Minas, an extremely relevant organization for this biome, which had been conducting specific work with indigenous and traditional communities, which now can be strengthened and help raise the profile and give a voice to indigenous and traditional peoples, those who are by nature the champions of this entire biome. So the scope of this project included traditional peoples and communities scattered across 9 states in the Cerrado: Bahia, Goiás, Mato Grosso do Sul, Maranhão, Minas Gerais, Piauí, São Paulo, and Tocantins, and also the federal district. As I said earlier, the idea was to strengthen Cerrado's share of the FIP and also contribute to the improvement of lifestyles and the sustainable management of local communities. I would like to invite you all to visit our exhibit area. There are some people now marketing their products there from the Amazon forest, from the standing forest. Now, highlights. 64 sub-projects implemented, 36 of indigenous peoples from 28 ethnicities, and 8 Quilombola communities and 16 traditional communities. Out of these, 16 are led by women, with 35,000 people as beneficiaries. So here we made progress to 51% as females, 10% as elderly citizens, 450 hectares where you have a sustainable management of the landscape in place, and with representatives from traditional communities supported in terms of conservation and other REDD+ processes at the regional, national, and global level. FIP's good performance show that we'll have additional funding of 930,000, and phase 2, the project will support communities in this post-pandemic stage in a resilient fashion with a view to reducing the impacts of climate change. So this is a major achievement that will pave the way to phase 2 of the project. So we'll be raising more and more the profile of traditional communities. So here as well, I would like to talk about FIP Macaúba, a sustainable vegetable oil based on Macaúba, based on agro-silvopastoral systems in partnership with family farmers in the Cerrado. I just had a conversation with the coordinator and we're trying to expand the project to biomes other than the Cerrado. So here you have some pictures and the key achievements. I think we have here a farmer who is part of the project, 2.3 thousand hectares of degraded pastures that are now being rehabilitated, 350 farmers as beneficiaries, as extractive operators of Macaúba. It is under a unique arrangement in the private sector. They have been working non-stop and also expanding to other domains, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the FIP Rural Landscapes project, the goal is to strengthen implementation of a conservation and rehabilitation and environmental reinstatement practices and low carbon emission practices with selected watersheds in the Cerrado biome. The primary results of this project were 6.4 thousand rural producers receiving managerial and technical assistance, over 560,000 hectares with land use planning in place for landscape management, and for 55.3 thousand hectares with low carbon agricultural practices in place. Once again, I would like to emphasize that now that we are challenged and the world is challenging us, we have a wealth of successful stories that could be scaled up. Now, FIP coordination project, of which right now, and as the Ministry of the Environment, the Brazil Investment Plan to the Forest Investment Program, with a technical coordination of the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, and also within our Secretariat for Traditional Peoples and Sustainable Rural Development. We have a great mission at hand, so that the Ministry of the Environment, so that the Secretariat can tell what we can do and what we cannot do, and also how we can continue to live and coexist with the environment peacefully with traditional peoples and communities. So this could be just a small drop of water in a forest fire. But for us, it really means when the world can become aware of our initiatives, in which traditional peoples and communities historically have positioned themselves against and have warned the world that they need to change, they need to evolve. So the implementation period from 2018 to 2024, whose primary goal was to strengthen Brazil's capacity and coordinate FIP's projects in the country. This is our commitment as the Ministry of the Environment and as the National Secretariat for Traditional Peoples and Communities. As a result, we have establishment of the PIP-FIP portal. It is available for you to access so that you can keep up with it, mapping synergies across the FIP projects, development of 8 institutional videos, and you can also see it in the room next door, as Pedro put it, and so you can really have access to everything that shows how successful this project have been. So we have 18 projects in Brazil, and now just one validation meeting to go. So here you have some maps where the projects are being implemented. Okay, here just to illustrate. So we are telling where it happens, what are the municipalities involved, Cerrado Monitoring, and FIP DGM Brazil. So you have that's where you have the small dots, which means that this is where demarcated lands are. This is all accessible so that you can monitor this. So here we have here the Bank of Investment of Brazil for forest investments, and our product 6 in the report, integrated synthesis of the performance and impact evaluation, also monitored by the Ministry of the Environment. Okay, just the evaluation. Okay, some data about the performance. What are the key performance highlights? Biodiversity. So I'll just leave this for you to read, because I am now past my 40 years of age, so I cannot read this in the small print. So here you have the figures for this assessment. And the performance in terms of inclusion and qualification inclusion. Over 400 workers trained for SIGA, 150 technicians were trained in pasture rehabilitation practices, in addition to property management. 58 government bodies empowered to improve management of forest resources, 21 NGOs with the relevant policies in place, 18 institutions capacities for landscape management. So here we also have the number of people covered by this contract. So this is a big picture of what of how we go about with a cross-cutting approach for our work. So we have some graphs here as well, reflecting this performance by areas of coverage. So, okay, having all of these impacts incorporated into the analysis, so we can see here what we have achieved and the impacts on, and the direct impacts. And what now, Parente? And what now, my dear friends? What now, my dear allies? Where are we going? My message is, as the Ministry of the Environment, we wish that we can more and more improve, enhance, and in particular, so that we can bring to the forefront of discussion those who protect, conserve, and advocate for the environment, traditional peoples and communities, and all of those who need to live in that world. So we are talking about all of us. And my question is, what now? Where to now? We want more. And we want the results to be thought about, to be synthesized, and so that it can be better now than it was in the past. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is a challenge here, so we have been able to share this presentation here. I think it's a really key issue to talk about how, when the program first came to Brazil in terms of its approach. So the idea was to promote a change. How can we promote change? And so in the program really provided evidence of this. If you can have sustainable agriculture, if you can innovate in terms of technology, monitoring, and partnerships, especially in the Cerrado, which is such a major program for all of us, as you very aptly pointed out, in terms of energy and all, and food. So it provides what we need. That is really operate on the basis of science and work towards sustainable development. So I think now, given this last slide, what about now Parente? So what can we learn from those recommendations to public policies, scaling up those projects, a modern, cutting-edge agriculture, low carbon emission agriculture, so also involving cooperative projects that we can develop with develop domestically and internationally, and also not only giving out knowledge but also receiving knowledge. So if we could show the video, we wanted to show it in the beginning, but we left it to the end. We'll be showing this video as we wait for the next session.
Segundo o maior bioma da América Latina, o Cerrado é extremamente importante para a nossa sobrevivência. Com uma extensão territorial vastíssima, tem cerca de 200 milhões de hectares e inclui 10 estados brasileiros e o Distrito Federal. É importante para a biodiversidade, para a segurança hídrica e alimentar e também para o equilíbrio do clima local e global.
Comunidade, a diferença é grande. Como melhorou o conhecimento, como melhorou a produção e como melhorou a valorização de ser mulher.
In general, we preserve more the land than the urban people, on those who live in the city. If you produce better, you reduce cost, carbon, and everything else, because the biggest asset we have is the land. They can't damage their area and their greatest asset. The CAR came to standard this work that some of us were doing, but it also helped us to have the real idea of what's missing and what we can do in our land, and bring this awareness also about the environmental aspect. The FIP program in Brazil is made up of multi-institutions, multi-ministries, and it's an extraordinary gain because it allows the integration of efforts from the university, from research centers, and NGOs, all of them working together with a common objective of promoting the environmental conservation of the Cerrado. Here we work with some fruits that grow more often here, and this region stands out for the production of all these fruits typical from the Cerrado. The crops are very fleeting, and you have to pay attention and protect them from fires. Also help the vegetation survive these difficult times as well. I'm learning a lot with the Cerrado project and learning to create solutions. It's a fruit for us, but for them it has different ways of working with it, such as producing oil, cosmetics, several things. For us, it's just a simple thing, but for them, it's a treasure. The Forest Investment Program, FIP, is funded by the climate investment funds. They're not meant to be a permanent source. It's a seed support to start activities, create know-how, knowledge for governments and institutions to be able to continue these actions in the medium and long run. With the experience acquired in these 10 years of learning with the FIP funding, it's expected the institutions obtain resources to continue their investments. And they incorporate lessons learned, technologies, knowledge acquired in their day-to-day, and in the conservation actions of the Cerrado biome. It's very rewarding when you notice the presence of different birds. You feel the difference in the air. It was a lot of work. It wasn't easy. And what we want to pass on to the new generations is precisely this concept of producing while preserving and taking care of the forest. Very good. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the previous presentation. She brought very important data, and it's very good to see environmental investments coming back, and also the concern with the environment in our country. And now we're going to have a very important discussion and also a very interesting one about the Cerrado. I'll invite the moderator of the next panel, Karen Kopp. She is the Subsecretariat in the Special Secretary of Government Analysis, in the presidency of the Republic. This is a huge name for a position, right? And Karen is also a specialist in public policies, and she has a degree at the London School of Economics. So I'll give you the floor to invite the whole team and to lead this panel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Welcome to Brasilia, my city that I love. Welcome to Cerrado, and it's very good to see my colleagues from the federal government, to see you again. It's a celebration moment, and I would like to thank the CIF and the Secretary of International Relations colleagues, as well as Funatura, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here as a moderator of such an important panel. And I want to congratulate the organizers of the event, the World Bank, IDB, ministries of the federal government that are engaged in promoting this meeting. And also for the decision you made for choosing Brazil as the host of this event. And we are going through a transformation and a reconstruction period. So the targets for our recently given for our reconstruction of environmental policies have just been presented, and our president has created new committees and tools for management and implementation of the decarbonizing policies in Brazil, but also very daring targets for fighting deforestation, recovering degraded land, and also for the conservation of the forest. So a plan for the Amazon region has a target to zero illegal deforestation. And we have a plan to protect the Cerrado from deforestation, which will be as ambitious as the Amazon plan. But not only that, we're talking about processes of expanding indigenous lands, quilombola territories, and the recreation of the environmental policy in so many fields in Brazil. So this is the right place to be and to host this event right now. I would also like to say that being with you makes me feel like celebrating the results of the project. I was invited because I'm in charge of the environmental topic at the the office, the president's office. And I'm so happy to participate in this historic moment, this 10+1 anniversary celebrating results and seeing the progress made by so many hands. So I think this is where we're going in the future, coordination. Now I will invite my colleagues to come forward. I'll interrupt you in a second, Karen, because I forgot saying something that's very important. We're having a visual representation in the adjacent room, in this room, on this board. As we discuss and as the ideas move on, you will see the visual representation of that. It's a very interesting piece of work, and it's worth looking at it. Yes, I can't see it from here, but I'm sure I'm going to go there and see it. So I'd like to invite the representatives of those who at the time were leaders, who participated very actively in the process of conception of FIP in Brazil. But since then, they kept on working as leaders in different fields of knowledge, different institutions, in the environmental area, science and technology, always promoting good results for Brazil. It's an honor to invite Garo Batmanian, but he hasn't arrived yet. So let's go to invite Mercedes Bustamante. She's the current president of the CAPES and a professor at the University of Brasilia. She's a member of the Brazilian Academy of Science and one of the main references on the Cerrado biome. She works with ecology of ecosystems and land use and land management. She has a master's degree from the Federal University of Viçosa, as well as her PhD in geobotanic. Her PhD in geobotanic was done in Germany. Our next speaker is Pedro Neto. He has a degree in economic sciences from the Catholic University of Brasilia. He's a specialist in project management and has an MBA in executive training of the Dom Cabral Foundation and a master's degree in sustainable development at the Federal University of Rio, and he is the current Secretary of Innovation Development, Sustainable Development, Irrigation, and Cooperativism. Our last panelist, we have Mr. Maik Arruda. He is the General Coordinator of the Management Committee of DGM Brazil and representative of Rede Cerrado. He's been working for more than 20 years in value chains focused on the Babaçu chain, and he's an activist in the solidarity economy movement in Brasilia. Currently, he is the coordinator of the DGM committee and representative of Rede Cerrado. He has a degree in agro-industrial technology, and he's a specialist in project management. We will have 2 rounds of questions, and each panelist will have 5 minutes to answer them. After that, we'll open the floor for the audience to ask questions. So I'd like to start asking a question to Professor Mercedes, a colleague also at the Climate Network, Rede Clima. It's a research network for climate research. Based on your university your participation as a representative of university, how do you see the balance of the FIP and the legacy for the future? Oh, we have Garo with us. Welcome. I'm sorry, Professor. I'll just introduce Garo to our team. He's a PhD in ecology from the Georgia University in the U.S. He started working in the World Bank in 2004. He worked in the Latin American region and the Caribbean, and he has worked at the World Bank in Brazil and China, the director of the LAC WWF program in the United States, and he was the first CEO of WWF Brazil. He's also the founder and first president of FSC Brazil, and he's currently working at the Brazilian Forest Service. So let's start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Karen, for your introduction, and thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. I'm really touched to be here with Garo and other people in the audience to celebrate this 11th anniversary of FIP Cerrado. I'd like to bring a bit of the history of how this project was devised. Garo was part of it, representing the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation. And it's important to say what we learned in this process. The first thing we can highlight 10 years ago is that we were fighting for FIP in Brazil to focus on the Cerrado biome. It was not obvious or natural at the time. So we debated in the beginning to discuss whether we would go from a forest biome and use FIP within the Cerrado biome scope. This was, I think, the first important step. And the second innovative step at the time, I say innovative because of public policies, constructions, but also to look at the Cerrado biome, was the coordination among different ministries. I think it's very interesting to see that as a lesson. We had the Ministry of Finance at the time as part of the coordinators, and it was a joint work between science, technology, and innovation, agriculture, environment, all these ministries bringing these different perspectives into the FIP. So it was the first time we were able to devise for the Cerrado biome a program that was truly integrated in its different fields. Not necessarily this was an easy job. So it was very important. We had to adjust and make it a common job, a common project. And at the time, the project was very innovative because we wanted to show the importance of having a program in Brazil focused on the Cerrado biome. And we had to show to our international partners why we wanted to do that. And I followed the Cerrado biome very closely. We have moved forwards in terms of monitoring fires, especially mechanisms involving traditional communities and indigenous peoples, the social biodiversity chains, and the low carbon practices. There were many achievements, of course, but we haven't achieved everything we wanted in certain fields, like controlling deforestation in the Cerrado. Although we have a better perspective nowadays, I think we have we had a setback in the sense that we didn't achieve the target we wanted. So we have a lot of knowledge about the Cerrado biome, and it's enough knowledge for us to find solutions for protection and reducing deforestation. And more than that, I wish this plan of deforestation control in the Cerrado would go beyond illegal deforestation and moved towards the need of conservation in the Cerrado in more than the minimum foreseen by the Forest Code. This is how I see it from the university perspective. We have gained a lot of information. Unfortunately, the information we have added for Cerrado draws a more severe picture of the Cerrado and a stronger need for conservation. I was watching the video, I think Bernadette was speaking, saying that that was a seed investment. And now we really have to see the seed growing, all these investments with budget allocations that can use the knowledge accumulated to design fast public policies in terms of conservation. When we're talking about designs for actions in the Cerrado, it's not simple because it's too large. There's a lot of physiognomic alterations and configurations, and the water aspect as well. So for monitoring, we need to understand the Cerrado in its complexities. This should also be the driver for fighting deforestation and fires. Thank you, Professor. I think this is a very important time for us to understand this, because the National Fund of Science and Technology is now open for the application of this fund. And we hope that with the next cycle of this fund, we'll have a budget for that. FIP and this plan, they contributed with the perspective of public policy and federal strategic management with data information. And now we are facing a new cycle with new funds, science, and I think this is how we can have better perspectives about where we're going. Garo, I'm going to ask you a question. At the time, we didn't have a lot of video conferences, so Garo was always traveling, and not always we were able to meet. But nowadays, it would be easier to have these discussions. How would you translate to those who are here this paradigm change brought by FIP at the time, and also a perspective for the future, which paradigms still need to be broken? I apologize for being late. I had seen the video, so I was not that late, but As Mercedes said, I'm really touched to be here talking about FIP because I've been working in it since 2010. And different hats. I had to wear different hats. So that's why it's good to be bold. I can wear so many hats. But I'm still working with the FIP. Not talking about other colleagues, it's their option. But in my case, I have no other choice. So I started working with the FIP in Brazil, and I helped creating FIP in itself. And then I was the manager of FIP for the World Bank, and now I'm here in charge of the FIP projects in Brazil.
But the paradigm, the break of paradigm is manifold. So they accepted that we would work at Cerrado. In the beginning, they wanted to work in the Amazon. So we got together and said, no, the Amazon indeed is in need. It always needs more. But the Cerrado also needs help. It is important for water resources here and in terms of carbon as well, because sometimes the deforestation rates in the Cerrado are even more significant than the Amazon. So that's paradigm one. Cerrado is a program with a focus on enabling elements. It's not fighting against something, but developing enabling elements that have been mainstreamed by the government. So instead of working with root causes. So third, we were able to work on a topic that's now commonplace because Minister Marina is always talking about it and has been working on this very hard. But the cross-section approach. This program was designed with the Ministry of Finance under the leadership of Arthur Lacerda, Minister of Science and Technology with Ms. Mercedes in another ministry, and the Ministry of the Environment back then with Mr. Álvaro Pires, and the World Bank, and then so they got together, which is a novelty in itself. So it really breaks a paradigm. And the programs, and the fifth is also a paradigm shift. FIP generated the creation of the DGM. 10% of FIP's funds should go to traditional communities, but differently from other programs where traditional programs are beneficiaries because the program is implemented by the government. So here, traditional communities they have self-determination. They choose projects, they choose how to manage them, they will choose who will manage the funds. They are not simply beneficiaries, they are drivers in this process. So FIP, structurally speaking, the FIP has established those paradigms. In the case of Brazil, Terra Cláudia is there. We created FIP supported Terra class for the Cerrado, which is a tool that even now is used. So FIP started supporting ABC when no one was talking about it. So the pilot projects started with FIP Landscapes, which is implemented within the Forest Service. We have over 72,000 properties that have adopted low carbon practices, and now the Safra program has announced an expansion of ABC, so it has worked. So likewise, CAR, the Rural Environmental Registry, was approved in 2012. FIP was approved in 2012. So this is the first project that sought to implement the Rural Environmental Registry in Brazil, and in particular in the Cerrado. And so it has an extra focus because in fact, so the small players don't have many funds. So according to the legislation, they should be supported by the government. So CAR supported 25 families, quilombolas, runaway slave descendants, and traditional communities that currently operate the car was supported by the Forest Service. So again, an enabling case. So again, a case that's closer to the heart of Messages. We conducted a forest inventory. So people here might not be familiar with this, but Cerrado was scarcely known. Cerrado became known when Brasilia was established. So when Brasilia was built, President Juscelino Kubitschek set up scientific expeditions that would go to Cerrado for research, for collection. So, so some of the Cerrado we learned about back then. Okay, with FIP we now have 83% of the forest inventory of the entire Cerrado conducted within 10 years, not even that. So it started 8 years ago. So these are all structuring, they are all enabling tools. So that's the basic message here. Priority cross-cutting projects here. So that that became mainstream by the government. So the inventory continues with money from BNDES. Elsewhere, Terra Classe continues despite the end of the project. So this is the key message of how you can use funds from grants to establish enabling and cross-cutting projects that in the intermediate term can be amplified and scaled up by the government. I don't know if I've covered everything. Okay, so that's great to have such a qualified speakers. I think that the examples you provided gives us an opportunity to talk about the ABC programs. You remember that our climate change policy dates back to 2009. So, and this program was established in 2010. And here we have an experience of IPCC Cerrado and the rural landscapes. So, actually, so from the perspective of the Ministry of Agriculture, so there's a legacy contribution to low carbon agriculture. Thank you, Karin. Good afternoon, everyone. Before give you an overview, let me just tell you a story. I did not attend, I was not involved over the past 10 years, but I feel privileged because I was able to see the project from two perspectives. One from the perspective of sustainable development, low carbon emission, but I have the opportunity to see this initiative from a forest perspective. So I was working in the Brazilian Forest Service for about 1.5. So looking at it from both perspectives was fantastic. So the figures you shared, and when you said, this is a great example, very strong evidence of how when a policy is well designed, it goes beyond the project initiative itself, because it goes on to become a public policy, and then it becomes a shared program. And so Terra Classe is great in that sense. I won't say that it walks with its own legs, but we will be putting together Terra Classe Brazil. We've been long waiting for this, so it's great to look back and see such a great history and have this critical awareness of where we should be making improvements, but also look at it from a private sector perspective, and also ABC Plus, which came up around at the same time as FIP, in such a key biome for Brazil, was really fundamental. So over a decade of implementation of the ABC plan in its first version, we really had great results, and the possibilities of support brought by FIP for this cycle was really amazing. And the way, and of course, I will not go into discussion of whether it was good or not. Okay, the encroachment of deforestation, I believe, I do agree that it should be controlled in terms of illegal deforestation. But now agriculture does exist and drives this country, and so it should be less aggressive. So it should use natural resources more and more sensibly. And so with 7 technologies at first and today in phase 2 of ABC Plus, or have a more contemporary approach, something that's closer to what the world would expect from Brazil. And I think that this should be our attitude. So the more we do in terms of easing the pressure on natural resources, the better. So we have this hands-on approach in terms of how we can raise resources and manage public policy substantially. It does leverage our portfolio of projects, which includes FIP and other projects. So it's really great learning in terms of how to do things, how to get something that is in the an ordinance and a decree in the official gazette, and to turn that into something like conservationist practices, rational use of water and resources, in the sense of really minimizing the impact of production activities on the Cerrado and on the biomes. So I think in terms of an industry plan, there still have a long way to go. We have lessons to learn, but also as part of this project, we learned how to look behind and see what needs to be improved in order to update initiatives and deliverables, and to improve the cross-sectionality, improve accuracy of actions. What is that word when we talk about NDC? Not appetite, ambition. Improve the ambition in terms of moving forwards in our agricultural activities. I think this is very strong evidence that we can do it. We just should not really hesitate. We cannot hesitate. Yeah, we need to be able. We have started planning for ABC Cerrado, so we raise the bar as much as possible, and so also the agenda 2030-2035, including the sector plans. So this will help us look forward. So really great. So also, Mike, so what's your take on the engagement of traditional peoples and communities? What are the lessons learned for the future? It's really great, isn't it? First of all, I would like to thank, thank our members of the National Steering Committee in Brazil, 12 people from Quilombola and traditional and indigenous communities from across the Brazilian Cerrado. So we try to manage this process. I think we've been able, given the results we have, the indicators. I think that the Brazil Steering Committee is a benchmark, DGM Global, and also it has a great a relationship with Mozambique. We have visited a number of other areas. And Brazil is really a benchmark in terms of a community-based participatory management for those peoples. I think that this engagement and what led Brazil to become the reference it is for seizing that small window. We are a small window within FIP and CIFI, so we have an understanding of a pilot project. So the way it arrived within our organization. So the primary factor is how this is started. So I had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Astrogillo here. She was working at the bank back then. So we had a number of moments, not only within the indigenous territories, but the collective movements where those communities, where they could say, how we should do it, because we never really imagined, we never really realized how we could be behind the table. So we are no longer mere recipient of a public policy, and so we become managers of that process, of this investment within our communities. So it's really an absurd what we see when say, oh, okay, we've been able to get to DGM with 51%. It's because women are the ones who prevail there. They're the ones planting, the ones taking care. That's what we need to do. If we want to do in terms of gender equality in traditional communities and in other areas as well. I think that the big legacy we leave for DGM is that development. It was quite very challenging. And so a colleague says, one thing I love, what is the DGM we love about it? What is the DGM we really imagined, and the one that we made real? It was a very robust knowledge building. We understood about safeguards, about rules, how we work as part of this process, and also how we can ensure the leading role of those communities, the protection of the livelihoods of those projects. So DGM should become a public policy, and so these should come from those contexts, from credit contexts in terms of indigenous health. So we have created a very positive approach where we are there together, and we have lots of funds in Brazil with the BNDES. So a call for business just being released. So we have projects involving coconut breakers for environmental protection that are managed by indigenous communities locally, but the steering committee of DGM Brazil has a differential. It brings together indigenous, quilombola, and traditional communities together on the same page, and all of them discussing their problems and talking about what we need, and talking about what needs to be done so that we can take ownership, we can live decently within our territories. It is a challenge. We find the programs really great. So the ABC program, we had no idea about it, and now the Macaúba project, all of them as part of that picture. And we don't perceive ourselves as an isolated item, but we have the sense of belonging, and at the same time we know that we are part of social biodiversity that needs to be respected, that needs to be heard, and that needs to be taken care of. Thank you very much.
Excellent. This is very important. Moving forward, and multi-level governance models do bring implementation challenges, but they bring better results than when they're not implemented. I think it's very important. And we know that within this new paradigm of policy making, which is part of the last IPCC report, is that we use traditional knowledge and scientific evidences. Science and knowledge will serve as subsidies for decision making, and this is how we have to move forward, and something we learn in a more strategic level for public policies in Brazil. And when I talk about science and knowledge, I always remember Mercedes, and I'll give her the floor. When we take into account the objectives related to FIP, with the possibility of expanding the program, raising information, consolidating the national system of a forest registry, all these things, what would be what will these challenges be, and how can we face them? Well, if you ask me to talk about science, I'll talk until tomorrow. But it's important to say that when we started discussing the projects, the structuring projects, and the monitoring of the Cerrado, it may sound different. It actually sounds more than 10 years because of the pandemic period, but we had the monitoring system that raised data, and we had ad hoc initiatives that would monitor the Cerrado. So there we had the idea of how important it is to have a system that can provide quality, continuous data that looks at the complexity of the Cerrado and that could monitor systems which are mosaic of vegetations like the Cerrado, which is different from monitoring forest service such as the Amazon, and still it's very complex. So that we advanced and moved forward, but now it's not only monitoring deforestation, but the transformations that even natural coverage, forest coverage, suffer from. So we have to evolve in monitoring systems in order to understand this complexity and also to follow the reverse route. How do we follow restoring processes that we need to implement in the Cerrado biome? We have a system that has left a huge environmental liability, and we have to restore a lot of areas. They're different from the Forest Service recover project. So we need science, technology, and innovation for the restoring strategies, and also to monitor this restoring practices. So we have to learn all that and do all that. And this is a very important space for us to discuss the invisibility of indigenous peoples and traditional communities in the Cerrado. This was another concern we had when we started this project. To be clear about these territories, as we exchange knowledge, like you mentioned, about the forms of use, of management of these territories, and that it involves the safeguarding of the rights of these people. So there's another area involving political sciences, social sciences, which must be coupled to this monitoring process, which is understanding the advocacy for human rights, and this discussion needs to move forward as well to capture the different modes of life and the different forms of livelihood, and also the relationship with nature. We also looked at another thing, the interface with the changes in land use because of the agricultural sector and cattle raising. I don't like to talk about the productive sector because we as professors are also productive, but still we need to look at it, and we need to correct this route in order to allow the survival of cattle raising and agriculture in Cerrado. So this 10-year window also showed something to us as we were improving our database and everything, is that the rest of the world didn't stop when we were accumulating knowledge. So it now brings a need for an urgent response for conservation, restoration, and new practices in the Cerrado. I will close, I promise, but I'll say one more thing. We have this concern today to look at what it means to expand the borders of the Cerrado, which are the last native vegetation of the Cerrado, and also other initiatives of occupation that needs to be looked at and considered. This is why I think we need a FIP plus 10, because we have a solid foundation, but we have a lot of questions to answer. And now we have the FNDCT starting again, and I believe that CAPES will launch a call for researchers in this field. So we will have more interaction with the support of research foundations, and these issues have to be discussed within this environment. until the end of the 21st century. This is what we need to look at, where we want to be in 50 years. And we also need to answer this question very fast because the biome has lost 50% of its coverage. And the processes have a very specific dynamics. So we still have a huge field of discussions and answers to give. And when we talk about the interactions of knowledge, we have moved forward in this interface finally. This last IPCC report mentions indigenous peoples and traditional communities within the scope of climate change. It has a lot of makes reference to them, and it's I think it's an achievement. And I would like to say just one more thing. I promise. We should not at this time consider a discussion of something called the indigenous land time landmark. I think we can't accept it in Brazil nowadays. Thank you, Professor. We did have our first meeting last week to devise the PPB Cerrado. You are the sectorial representative here from the Ministry of the Environment. And how can FIP contribute to the next cycle? I'd like to make another comment before I answer your question. Brazil's DGM, well, I used to be the general coordinator of all DGMs in the world at the World Bank, and Brazil's DGM is the reference of all the other DGMs. Thanks to you, to Alberto, Beth. It is the example used by the other DGMs. That's why it has reached phase 2. I congratulate you, and you are the role model. You worked hard, but the result was very good. So at the PP Cerrado, we should see the same thing that we see at the PPC then. It's not just fighting deforestation, but also encouraging good practices. It's not just avoiding bad practices to occur or occur without punishment, but to promote sustainable practices, good practices. This is a balance present at the PPC then. And the PP Cerrado will be created based on this bias. Not only monitor and punish illegalities, but also to promote what's necessary for the Cerrado. And there are structuring aspects things that need to be done. The CAR is not totally implemented. We need to make it work. And we can't think of CAR only, but the recovery of degraded lands of legal reserves and permanent protected areas. Now that you have this registry, we know the deficit, and then we need to develop the environmental recovery program, public areas as well. And it can be done with carbon credits. I hope it's soon approved, but I hope we can have the program that, even though it's a pilot program, we can start showing how restoration and concession for restoration can work in the biome and generate revenue. Not only through carbon credits, but we talk about Baru, we talk about other things that we plant in the Cerrado that can generate revenue, not related to timber, and at the same time be added by the carbon credits, and it can be done by the populations. We can integrate large areas with the communities around it because you can create scale. These are two aspects I see we would have to continue working on. And there is a third part we didn't mention. I don't know how it would fit in the new FIP, Nature and People, but it's water resources management, because it's in Cerrado where we have the main sources of water, and we need to manage the landscape in a way that we could include maintenance and improvement of the quality of water from rivers in these properties. It's a mix of ABC and the FIP program we already had, adopting new good practices, and reforestation. So we would need a set of actions and think of economic incentives. If you're not from Brazil, we have a new law of service, of payment for service, environmental services, also the carbon credits, at least 3 financial instruments that could be used, even in a pilot project within the FIP. Because you need to have a concessional financing first to see how it works, and then use these 3 instruments to improve the management of the landscape. We know what to do, but now we need to find a line of funds. So we need to use all the information generated by FIP so far, and then invest more in these areas to create technology packages that have a financial part to it. Of course, we did 83%, right, Humberto, of the registry, but there is 17% left, so let's do it. And of course, we have work to finish, but this would be the new phase. Mike, if you can talk about the same topic, environmental management of Cerrado, how traditional communities with this new institutional framework and this new cycle, how can they contribute? This is a complex question because it's impossible for them to contribute because they are the conservation. It's their form of life, the way they interact, the indigenous peoples have thousands of years of experience, and it's because of them that we have what we have in terms of conservation. So this is the main contribution they can give, is that the Brazilian state, that the university, that the supporters can guarantee that they stay there and that they stay alive and that they have children and that they reproduce their knowledge, their culture, their language. This is the main contribution they can give, that we can give. So I'm going back to my territory and the coconut breakers in the state of Maranhão. We need to systematize these modes. When we have Embrapa systematizing the century-old management of Babaçu breaking and extraction, oil extraction, it can be systematized, it can be reproduced, and it can be spread and finally adapted. I see these women, the coconut breakers and the licuri breakers and their interaction. It's this way of life. It's how they live, and this is the best contribution that we can give for environmental conservation. And what we ask, actually what we require and what we need now is that these communities are seen more and more, that they have the society, the state looking at them, and that they perceive that the way they live and what they do is key for the environmental balance of our country. We have the horrible situation at the Araguaia area. These people, as traditional communities, they can disappear in less than 20 years unless we discuss what's happening there at the Araguaia region. And expanding major borders. Very soon we won't have coconut breakers in Brazil unless we offer them the title for their land, the recognition, the formal recognition that the white people require from the process. Unless we do that, we won't be able to guarantee them to stay where they are. This is the main contribution that we traditional communities can offer to conservation in our planet to mitigate everything that's been happening in relation to climate. It is live live us alive, allow us to reproduce. The state needs to see this. When we build projects, programs, and funds like this one, the example we have here is rich, but it's just a seed. So you need to take the FIP seed and reproduce it, replant. This is our main contribution. And also, Pedro, for my last question, when we look at the future, we know that many are looking at Brazil and deforestation, but also many eyes looking at our agricultural production. The Safra plan was launched today, and we know there's an effort for expand low carbon agriculture, the environmental and sustainable component. But there's also another strong pressure from the other side, the driver of agricultural expansion. So because of that, we have huge challenges to recover degraded areas as part of our contribution, not only for climate change, but also in other multilateral conventions. So there are so many challenges in this sector. I'd like to hear from you, from the perspective of the Ministry of Agriculture, how you see these challenges and which tools can be put in place for us to have more good stories to tell. I remember when in Brazil we stopped emitting, we stopped emissions caused by deforestation, and this balance was caused by the better use of the land. It didn't take long, though. But if we stop emitting because of deforestation, then Brazil will be looked at from the perspective of land use. Well, thank you. Before I answer your question, I'd like to say two things, highlight two things that I heard here. One is FIP plus 10. Maybe it's a good time to think of that, because this is where we are working on, we are working on the Cerrado FIP. So if we have it coming with the same appetite, with the same willingness to change, it's going to be amazing, because we produced a lot of documents in a short period of time. And last week, I think, the PP Cerrado meeting took place. And it's a new challenge and an opportunity to make certain things concrete within this plan. And also got to mention that it goes beyond controlling deforestation, but it has to do with the spread of good practices, to use the opportunities, and also the funding mechanisms. And then I'll piggyback on this to talk about the next challenge. Every nation has a productive profile. And there's a challenge to look at the emissions and the need for reduction. Everyone needs to do that. In Brazil, it's related to land use. Great. We need to face it. This challenge of improving our performance in this regard than with the deforestation. So this is what I want to do. I think it compensates. It's good enough. So I think our ministry is better prepared to fight these things, because we have ABC Plus, the consolidation of this program, the organization of the internal structure of the ministry in the Department of Sustainable Production and Irrigation, to be leading this initiative, which is in its second cycle.
And also our ability to improve our evaluation, monitoring, and reporting capabilities, so that we can have more sophisticated concepts. And so this will help us the way we look at the data, and also share this with everyone working in this context, so that we can improve our figures. That's one thing. In addition, the advent of the degraded lands and deforestation division in our department. So we were discussing this challenge last week. How can we encourage reforestation, whether it is restoration for restoration purposes, be it in terms of restoration or reforestation for bioeconomy or other uses within the rural property, but while observing the rural compliance agenda, so that rural owners can do it. But how can we get out of the box this? Yeah, we should start doing it on a voluntary basis. That's what we've been looking into at the Ministry of Agriculture, to share it with the Forest Service so that we can adopt a more technical approach. So along those lines, we would be really making up for environmental liabilities, especially along river banks, and also the best use of areas in the context of rehabilitation. So those mappings, they take many forms. We can look at degraded areas in a number of ways. So our efforts now are, and this, we are about to finish this. How can we look at those figures in terms of areas that can be converted, be it for so that number can be looked at in a number of ways. I want one perspective that will respond to what I need. How can I have that work in a less aggressive manner, which means converting it for agricultural use, for reforestation as well. This will materialize in the Sustainable Forest Plus program that will have 3 pillars. First, in planted forests, this is now being reviewed. This will not have such a big interface with what we have here. Second one is actual reforestation, then with the involvement of traditional communities, indigenous communities, in order to really make the most of this potential, but also forest supply chains, biodiversity, the knowledge you mentioned, which are so wealthy in the Cerrado region, and the Sustainable Forest Plus. So we want to match rehabilitation and reforestation projects that we can match with the bidders. But all of this depends on the development of those maps that we'll be discussing to the academic community. The idea is not to be exhaustive or final, so you have a significant component of voluntary action. So as we move forward with the best practices, so as this really becomes stronger, so I believe that if we can, from that perspective of degraded areas of reforestation, a better qualification of our metrics in ABC Plus, and the way we discuss this in major fora, I think this can lead us to a new cycle for FIP plus 10, FIP plus 20. So that's what I would expect. It could be FIP 35 because we are going as far as 2035. So here's my suggestion. Okay, we now have. So now we open the floor for a Q&A session. Hi, Karen. So the idea now is to have a super indigenous presentation of Giba Tuxá and Anália Tuxá, who are representatives from the Tuxá people and who will be showing us what we describe as mystics. Is that okay? I think you can Yeah, go back to your seats so that they can have more space available for their performance. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so Giba and Analia, they are now coming here. So FIPE Brazil will give a gift to everyone here, present to everyone present here. So just after the performance by Giba and Analia, just come here to the corner and you will be receiving this gift by FIPE Brazil. Anything else? Oh, a beautiful thing I've just been reminded of. Shiba and Analia, they attended the opening ceremony here with a number of performances with many people delivering important messages, and now they're coming back for the closing session. That's beautiful. So you're coming on stage, right? Shiba and Analia Tushar. So they are indigenous leaders.
Obrigado, Anália Giba Tuxá, do povo Tuxá. Privilégio poder terminar com vocês esse evento. Estamos, então, terminando aqui, gente, o evento que teve um dia inteiro que eu acho que discutiu.
It is a privilege to have you in this closing session. We are now coming to the end. We have had a number of perspectives about environmental issues, a critical mass, and also hope, incredible projects that are happening. So it's really great to be hosting such an important event in Brazil, and the opportunity to show Brazil's initiative. So congratulations to all delegates, and thank you. And now here next door, let's continue our celebration. So thank you, everyone. And don't forget, so here you have a gift by FIP Brazil for those who wish to take it.